what is climate change? Like when we talk about this big thing, like when we search on Google climate change, what's going to pop up? A lot of it may be on the rising temperatures, or it may be on other issues.
Greenhouse gases.
Yeah. So one of the main things that pops up is the meat industry, and it's something that's been talked a lot about lately, more so in recent years, and how it contributes to greenhouse gases. Right? Like you hear people saying they're going vegetarian or vegan because it's good for the environment. Why is it good for the environment, and why do people feel the need to make drastic changes to their lifestyle to help the planet? What else can we do to help the planet besides reducing our meat intake?
Protein in your diet. Regardless of what your diet is, you need protein.
Products are actually known to be the greatest source of essential amino acids, which is what protein is, right? There's essential amino acids and non-essential amino acids. It's always going to provide those essential amino acids that you need. A study conducted actually found that meat products are known to be the greatest source of essential amino acids, including branched chain amino acids, which were delivered mainly by meat and meat products, and were also the most important source for essential amino acids.
But I do want to touch really quick on the vegan side of things. Like, when you're consuming a vegan diet, how does that influence the environment? Because a lot of people go vegan in order to help the environment.
Yeah.
But if you're missing out on a lot of the things that meat gives you, you have to find them in other forms.
Yeah.
And then you have to go maybe to a synthetic product, which a lot of the times those aren't produced in the most ethical or cleanest ways.
So there's actually studies that have been done on that. One in 2019 found that going entirely vegetarian for the rest of your life means you reduce your emissions by about 2%. So out of the 100% of emissions that you are omitting, that's in only 2% by cutting out meat. And the study actually found that these emissions would be otherwise contributed to through saved grocery costs with excess purchasing in some other form of the supply chain. So say you go vegan, you, for example, you don't eat chicken. So you go to buying like Beyond Meat, like the plant-based chicken.
With all these additives.
All these additives, anything else that's contributing, that may have more greenhouse gas emissions than chicken.
If not the same.
Yeah, and we see this a lot in lab-based meat as well. Researchers at UC Davis did find that lab-grown meat's impact is likely to be orders of magnitude, quote, higher than retail beef based on current and near-term production methods. So that's just one factor in lab-based meat, is how it could be the solution that people are looking for, but it's actually worse for the planet. And you're not getting those essential amino acids that you need from meat.
If you're going to consume meat, you'd want to get it from a reliable source. You'd want to get it somewhere ideally local, somewhere that's not mass producing their meat, not treating it with anything that you don't need.
Yeah, and I think that's the big issue of it is so corporatized now, because our population, and this is something I want to touch upon too, is that our population has skyrocketed. And this really didn't start until post-World War II. So a 2017 study found that total production of meat has more than quadrupled since 1961. This is in part due to a rapidly growing population.
Really uses, that causes a lot more demand for things like water supply, human effort, land space.
Why is meat the thing that people are focusing on when they say that population has expanded and it's now becoming an issue with not only feeding people, but the global impact of land usage? States Environmental Protection Agency found that agriculture, including meat, creates only 10% of total U.S. greenhouse gas emissions. Considering that, when I say agriculture, I am not strictly saying meat.
That's the whole shebang.
This also includes crops, which yes, can be crops used for supplying meat, but it's mainly going to the human population. When we dive deeper into that 10%, what we're actually finding is that livestock production in the US contributes to only 4.2% of all greenhouse gas emissions.
And that's not that much comparatively, because if you look at other parts of our economy that contribute to all these greenhouse gases, What are some of the other percentages that you're looking at?
Transportation, 28%. That is almost 7 times greater than livestock production. We got electric power at 25%, industry contributing at 23%, and residential and commercial at 13%. All numbers for the EPA.
All of those are higher than all of agriculture.
And combined are 9 times greater than agriculture. Yeah, so one of the things that we can really look at in recent history that we can all remember is the COVID pandemic. You know, it impacted all of us in a variety of ways, but you know, the main thing we think about when we think of that is quarantine.
Yes.
We were all locked up. Nobody was using their cars except for, you know, maybe essential workers going to work, that kind of thing.
But that was still statistically so much lower than what we're used to.
Yeah, transportation completely dropped down. A lot of emissions that were happening completely dropped because these industries weren't open. What we find actually in a study by the EPA is that during the pandemic, there was a sharp decline in emissions due to the impacts of the coronavirus pandemic on travel and other economic activity. So that's not including the meat industry. That's talking about travel, so planes, cars, trains,
Cruise ships.
Significantly cut down.
You name it. There's so many different forms of transportation these
Oh
days.
yeah, significantly cut down, and other economic activities. So like industry, which is that 23% contributor, that was cut down too because these people weren't going to work. You know, like cargo shipping.
One of the most obvious signs that if you cut greenhouse gas emissions, if you cut so many different aspects of the industries that we have right now, like transportation, you could visibly see in the environment how much it benefits from not having all of these outside factors. The meat industry alone contaminates the water because of the fertilizer it uses. It uses so much land, a lot of times it's by deforestation, which then just harms the entire ecosystem around it. Especially in Italy, there were so many animals that started returning to their natural habitats just because it was safe to finally. No, but I mean, it was the first time that they saw dolphins in the Venice Canal.
So I guess we're not just seeing only an impact on, you know, beef production, pork, chicken, but also just the natural eco state. What can we do to kind of replicate those situations? What can we do to kind of bring back that natural state? I think one of the biggest things is transportation. I'm sure the reason there were a lot more dolphins in the Venice Canal is there were less ships.
Yes, there were so many different ports were just completely empty.
Yeah. Well, we're also just in that growing state of urbanization, modernization, consumerism. You know,
we're still in an industrial age, unfortunately, that
Yeah.
is using so much of the environment to the point that we can't replenish what we're using fast enough.
Yeah. So we could even talk about something like Amazon, right? When you order more than 2 items, right? You get the option. Ship in the same box, save shipping costs. So we can kind of look at that and think, well, what kind of decisions can we start making? What kind of mandates can we start using to
How can
really
we hold ourselves accountable for this?
really regulate this?
Even though it's not necessarily our thing to hold ourselves accountable for.
Yeah. But one of the things we can kind of look at with that is the meat industry is very much so consumer based. It's individual based. When you read an article saying stop eating meat for the planet, it'll make it better, that really falls on the individual person to go to the store, say, you know what, maybe I won't buy this steak, consume another form of protein, maybe we'll have beans.
Which it should always be up to the consumer what
Yeah.
they are consuming. But unfortunately, we don't have a lot of options.
Yeah.
So if you're looking for the best option, sometimes it doesn't even exist.
Yeah. And I think the main thing that we can really focus on with this is that is consumer choice. It's individual choice. It's you stop buying meat because it hurts the environment. But what we don't consider here is electric power. And then think about what that's regulated by, right? Like the meat industry is regulated by the USDA, the FDA, the EPA. Electricity isn't really that regulated.
How can we shift the focus from the meat industry's emissions down to anyone else that has any more emissions than the meat industry?
Yeah. What kind of government regulations can we look for that would really help with this point of ultimately reducing other main contributors of greenhouse gases besides meat. Because I'm not saying meat doesn't play a part. What I am saying is that there are a lot bigger contributors that nobody focuses on because they are focused at a much more macro scale. One of the things that we could try to think of, maybe tax cuts. They're using solar power. Tax cuts for reducing their emissions and being audited and seeing that their emissions are steadily decreasing.
For doing whatever they can, no matter how big or small it is.
Yeah.
The problem is that no one's doing anything and it's being held, we are the ones being held reliable.
Yeah.
It doesn't make sense.
Yeah, I mean, you go to the grocery store, how many times do you bring your little reusable produce bag?
Constantly.
Meanwhile,
I bring garbage bags on a
Yeah.
hike to pick up garbage from state parks.
Meanwhile, Taylor Swift is flying on a private jet, 30 minutes between places. The question here really is, how is this fair?
And how is it our fault?
Yeah. How is it your fault that, you know, environmental destruction is occurring at a rapid rate due to these greenhouse gas emissions, and you have to go out of your way to grab plastic bags, bring reusable produce bags, make sure you're recycling properly when half of it doesn't even get used.
Mm-hmm.
We have so much of the onus falling upon us, and yet we see these large corporations doing nothing.